knowledge, geo. I will try to compile all of them in a very few sentences. First of all, I believe that man is a custodian in the earth. And the main task for the man, for the benefit of the man himself, is to keep the current state as good as it is, if not to improve and develop it. And this is the concept of the quality of life. In doing so, there are, of course, different institutions, such as UNEP on global level, who draw international environmental policies. And coming to UNEP, we also know that the major groups come usually to UNEP, and major groups play, in fact, a very important role. They play a double role. On the one hand, they spread the message of UNEP. They spread different policies, different decisions to their constituencies. And on the other hand, they also represent different categories of the societies, major categories of the societies. So they bring the hopes, they bring the hopes, the problems, and also the knowledge from the people. Thanks a lot. From the people to the UNEP for a better decisions. And in this regard, I think if we are looking for citizen science, which is very important in this area, I think major groups are very well fitted to play an instrumental role. Because we are looking for volunteers, but here major groups are well organized. It's a well organized group, so they can really spread the message and collect the right people, assign the right tasks. And regarding the second question about who should be in the room, who should come? And of course, if you need to have a sound decision, you need to have everybody in the room. You need to have all stakeholders. But I think there should be an emphasis on two groups. The first one is youth and children, because they are the future. We don't want to repeat our mistakes, so we need to empower them from the very beginning. I think their presence are very important. And the second one is the private companies who develop new technologies. We are speaking here, but many of the international companies, especially the big ones, develop the technology. Sometimes they greenwash it, but it's very important to bring, not for the whole meeting, but at least for a dedicated session, newly innovative, approved, clean technology. Their presence is very important also to exchange practices and also interact with the policy. For traditional knowledge, which of course it refers to the knowledge, innovation, and practices of indigenous people around the world, which is developed through experience, gained over centuries, adopted by local culture and environment, and passed usually orally from generation to generation. And it is collectively, this is one special characteristic of it, it's collectively owned and takes different owned by the societies, and takes also different forms. Sometimes we can find it in a form of a song or a story or a proverb. So they are not really well written as a modern sciences. And of course, they take different forms of tradition in various fields. I will show a couple of pictures here. The famous one is in the farming and the agricultural knowledge, irrigation, housing, landscape. This couple of pictures is coming again. It's coming soon.
Can we show the slides, please?
Okay. This couple of pictures is from the MENA region, where of course we know they have scarcity on water, very hard climate conditions, but the people living there managed for centuries to live in harmony with the nature. In fact, they can't live in harmony now with all this modern technology, but they used in irrigation and agriculture a very nice techniques where they have very simple systems called afflage. It has different names in different countries, where they have a water separation for various, the same mainstream which service household and then service agriculture and then service any other uses. And for the next one, also shows different types of, next one. different types of water wheels, which is used in the region. It's very simple, it's very efficient, and had worked for centuries. It doesn't require modern technology, and it was very effective. And the last picture I'm going to show is one for housing. We know that we have air conditions, but they have managed to live in this hard climate with simple techniques in housing, where they have in the middle of the house like a space which is usually shaded, allow the air ventilation to go smoothly and protect them from the sands. It was very efficient, and it was applied not only in houses, it was applied also in markets. We are now familiar with big malls and all these things. I think it's more sustainable in the region to have these, in a region like mine, to have this type of traditional markets that is usually covered and with a small lanes oriented to the wind direction. It's very effective, and also, on the other hand, it helps consumers to buy more, in fact, because you live in the market, so it has double benefits. And I don't say we need to depend mainly on traditional knowledge, but I would like to comment about one conclusion from yesterday, science policy, because I think we need to revise it, where one of the key observations said that the challenges facing the world today are complex, and we cannot solve it with simple solution. After seeing this, I think we can solve it with simple solution. We don't have to think about complexity. We can change a different type in design, a different type in construction. Even in economic system, we can come about innovation in economic system. Just with one policy or something, it can change the whole economic system in one country. So I think simple solutions are there, and indigenous knowledge are a good example. And of course, we need, in order to benefit from indigenous knowledge, it should be better researched. There should be a mechanism and framework and process for addressing this, because it can help deliver the union policy and achieve and realize sustainable development goals. And also we need to pay attention to the crucial ties between biological and cultural diversity and the conditions that allow communities to be empowered for conservation. For GEOs, which is my last comment, GEO is very important. GEO, UNIPLIVE, all GEO products, which develop the current state and monitor the development of the state of the environment every 4 years or so. I think they are very crucial for the achieving and realizing SDGs. It could be another hand for SDGs to make sure that we are on the right track. It was. I'd like here also to thank Jacqueline. Yes, last thank for you, because I think she had a very big push for major groups. Major groups were very involved on global and regional level, high-level panel, and this was a good example of participation on the major groups in the GEO process and also spreading the message. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mohammed. So Florence, would you like to speak now? Thank you. I just noticed that all the women are at this end and all the men are at that end. That just happened by accident, all right? So.
I speak as part of the indigenous peoples. There's a group of indigenous peoples promoting indigenous peoples' self-determined sustainable development through holistic approach. And also, as having been part of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. The question posed to us this afternoon is how can major groups, citizen science, indigenous knowledge contribute to advanced monitoring of SDG implementation? I would say for us, the group that I'm speaking for would be continuity of what we are doing. Mohammed said that SDGs are on the right track, It is because I also affirm that view. It is because SDGs, in the introductory statements of the SDGs, we can see that SDGs did not come from a vacuum. It was informed by past decisions and past treaties. When we, the indigenous peoples, struggled and got the approval for the recognition of indigenous peoples' rights, we did not also fight for new rights. We fought for the reiteration of the we fought for the reiteration of multilateral agreements and treaties on human rights, development, and non-discrimination. So we will continue to be fighting for that. And so we say we continue to monitor because we have, when we fought for this right, for our rights, we also saw to it, we are seeing to it that this should be a living document for us and that it should be implemented on the ground. So our integration into the international community have pushed us to develop our information system, some of which started with the work of indicators and pilot testing of traditional knowledge pertinent to Article 8J, the in situ conservation, and Article 10C, the sustainable use of resources of the UNCBD, and which expanded to include how indigenous peoples' rights are taken into consideration on the UN RED programs of the UNFCCC. When we started the work, we were made aware by the UN Statistics Division that data collection on the issue of indigenous peoples will be a groundbreaking work, and that data collection and disaggregation concerning indigenous peoples pose unique challenges in terms of both developing data for global comparative purposes and developing data that is useful at the micro level for the indigenous peoples. But we were undaunted, and we worked for it, and we had workshops from 2006 to 2010, and we were able to produce results. We were able to popularize the findings that indigenous territory management conforms with the basic features of ecosystems-based approach, thus the need to revitalize and strengthen these practices. The experience resulted into the conceptualization of the community-based monitoring and information system, and later followed by the indigenous navigator. The community-based monitoring and information system for us intends to empower communities to be able to own and manage their information and monitoring systems, to contribute to sound and timely decision-making and all in the communities, and also to contribute to report to national and global processes. Foremost, it intends to monitor indigenous peoples' development intervention in their own territories. Also, it will monitor status and trends on the state fulfillment of its obligation on rights and development. So we selected 5 domains. It's land, territories, and resources, traditional knowledge, which includes traditional languages and traditional occupation, full and effective participation, and traditional governance. And we also included human rights. It is to reflect status and trends in recognition of social and political rights and civil rights, and all the rights that is supposed to be implemented by the state. Community-based monitoring and information system is also being used to monitor and advance our community research in developing our resources in our development intervention. While we appreciate treaties like the Nagoya Protocol, which promotes for the protection of our knowledge and to ensure access and fair and equitable sharing of access of benefits arising from the use of our knowledge, we are also doing our own research and product development so that we can also advance our livelihoods, like making use of microorganisms, foliar sprays in our agriculture, for us to be able to increase our the productivity of our land. The Indigenous Navigator was to create awareness on the rights of indigenous peoples, the international treaties that carries the different provisions of the UNDRIP and the committees responsible to monitor this. To advance monitoring and implementation, we will continue what we have started. We will continue to monitor our performance, to care for the Mother Earth, to advance prosperity, peace, justice, and development, inclusivity, healthy people, healthy environment, respect for the integrity of creation. These are big words that matter to us as they are embedded in our culture within the context of our territorial jurisdiction. While we worry that there are just minimal reference to indigenous peoples in the SDGs, we pin our hopes in the preambular and introductory statement of the new agenda, which to a great extent carry the big terms mentioned above, which we hold dear in our hearts. Ending all forms of poverty and hunger, commitment to developing countries, equality and non-discrimination, respect for race, ethnicity, and cultural diversity, inclusiveness, would be applying the values of indigenous peoples in a global scale, in a collective journey for sustainable development, where no one of the 7 billion population of the world will be left behind. Thank you.
Very good points, thank you. Thank you so much, Florence. So I'm going to go to the other end now. Peter.
That was long.
I got the mic. Thank you, Jackie. And friends and colleagues, my name is Peter Denton. I'm a regional representative for North America. I'm from Canada. And my accredited organization is the United Church of Canada. And that will have some relevance in a couple of minutes. The two questions we were asked to consider, the first one was how do we arrive at sound evidence-based policy to guide the environmental dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals in the 2030 Agenda. And I want to first focus on what we mean by evidence. We have, I think, inherited a problem where we see evidence as just the facts. Certainly, if you are in a room full of scientists, they are debating the information and the facts. But I'm a philosopher. And so I always ask where those facts are coming from and what the context is. So in terms of who needs to be in the room, we need to have people in the room who are involved with thinking through what the values context is of the information. There's no such thing as values-free information. It always comes with a context, with baggage, with various components that we may not recognize. If we're not mindful of them, then we are not aware entirely of what the argument is being made. And actually, you need to think about evidence. Evidence only works if you're constructing an argument. We use evidence to reach to sound conclusions, to support our conclusions, to argue in critical thinking context towards ones that are the inferences toward the best explanations. So we cherry pick our evidence, and we cherry pick it according to reasons that we think are perfectly good ones. But we need to ask, what is the context for those reasons? Where do they come from? The second piece that we were asked to consider was when we look at the delivery of the Sustainable Development Agenda, what role do civil society organizations play? What kinds of activities are we talking about for this? And this leads me to why my organization is important, because I think we need to bring into the conversation the role that faith-based organizations play both in social service delivery everywhere, and particularly could play in the continuation of sustainable development toward realizing the goals of the 2030 Agenda. Faith communities are present in every community around the world. If we are looking at a problem with values, how do we decide what is good evidence toward a sustainable future? How do we incorporate the values of Indigenous peoples and other pathways towards sustainable development besides the one which has too often been tagged outside of the North as a colonial mentality? We can actually have a conversation around scientific colonialism in terms of ideas about science and evidence. How do we broaden that conversation? Well, one way would be to bring into that conversation, officially and formally, the elephants that are always in every room, which are those people who hold values associated with a religious tradition. And there's one of the perspectives was just published before UNEA, and I've written some stuff in there, and I'll leave you to look at the argument that's contained in that. The other piece, in terms of delivering the Sustainable Development Goals, if you look again at every community around the planet, there are organizations associated with religious traditions, faith communities, that are engaged in work around poverty reduction, around development, local development, around feeding folks, around caring for the sick, and in generally improving the lives of citizens everywhere. Rather than seeing faith-based organizations as somehow on a separate track or in a silo of their own, I think it is really important to have them brought within the conversation in a formal and effective way. And I've seen over the 3 times that I've been in this room a significant change in attitude, formally at least, toward the faith-based organizations and the roles that they can play. And certainly, in my involvement with the Science and Technology Major Group, I really appreciated the way in which Jackie and her folks associated with GEO6 made it possible not only for me to participate. I was the rapporteur for the intergovernmental multi-stakeholder consultation in Berlin, and also participated in the GEO6 regional assessment for North America. And while my background is not specifically science, I was able to bring a perspective, I think, that was of value in the ultimate findings of that assessment. And there are many more people in this room, and many more people who could be in this room, that could bring knowledge and skills and an understanding of the importance of the values perspective that will reshape the agenda that we need to reshape in order to reach a sustainable future. So it depends on how we conceive of the sustainability problem. From my perspective, sustainability is primarily foremost a social and cultural problem. It's not a scientific and technological one. We need sound evidence to support what it is we perhaps should do. But at the same time, we must deal with the values-based discussion that focuses on the social and cultural changes that are absolutely essential in order that the 2030 agenda becomes a reality and not simply wishful thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. We're nailing it down now, too. So is it Jim or is it Charles? Is it Jim or Charles? Okay. How about Jim? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jim Donovan. I'm going to speak about data. Very exciting this afternoon. First of all, coming from the perspective of the GEO6, I was happily invited to participate in that, and I'm the chairman for the Data Task Force, or the Data Fabric. Looking at the SDGs and how are we going to be able to implement them, effectively, we see the opportunity to take data, and we really do 3 things in our business. And just to give you a little bit of a perspective, I am one of those civil society or private sector participants that we really haven't heard a lot from, that effectively is in the data business for the private sector and governments. To give you an idea, we process somewhere near about 5 billion transactions a month. And in the environment, social, and governance space. So a lot of this is already being done. And in essence, what we've done, or what we do, is we find data, we give visibility, and we help people make smarter decisions. So the SDGs, as far as we see, is the combination of the science perspective meets policy, meets private sector, in addition to NGO and faith-based. All of those parties need to have a neutral territory to be able to speak, debate, and come up with better decisions. And we absolutely believe that data is that neutral territory. UNEA has a fantastic opportunity to provide an incubation for multiple coalitions that are now starting to form. For the past 10 years, we've led into more and more developmental work, moving from private sector to now about 30% of our whole business is just servicing the developmental world, where we provide data systems, visibility tools for, let's say, the largest carbon registry in the world. They're sort of the intel inside for these coalitions. So when you speak about indigenous people or citizen scientists, I think what Charles is going to be speaking about, there is fantastic opportunity to be able to pick up those data points and help make smarter decisions. They exist. The citizen scientists or the children we saw yesterday is actually the future of where we can start to gather more and more data points. Who needs to be in the room? I absolutely, I think there's 300 to 400 participants in this. Absolutely, I think there should be 3,000. And from more coalitions, more NGOs, more faith-based, to help bring better decisions. We've been very fortunate to participate in several of the different organizations within the UN, helping them with their mission. And we absolutely believe in what UNEA is doing and how we can participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. And so over now to Charles. Charles introduced us to a delightful quartet of students who were from very small to just slightly larger. And I was impressed by the fact that a 7, 8, 9-year-old came to the podium to describe protocols and then said, and I'd now like to hand over to my colleague, which I thought was just brilliant. So, Charles, please tell us about the GLOBE program and children's citizen science. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Like you've been told, my name is Charles Mongi. I represent the GLOBE program within the country. The GLOBE program is an international program that covers 117 countries. There has been mention of data. We have, since 1994 to date, we have over 135 million measurements that is available on different areas of study. And those areas of study, we call them the protocols, and that was what was presented yesterday by a school. Our main focus area is in the primary schools and in the secondary schools with the support of researchers and scientists who develop the protocols in areas of research. And for me, it's a noble opportunity and a very critical one to promote citizen science, because it offers a platform where you're able to receive the data, to collect the data and make it available for research and also for decision making. So one tagline really inspires me and talks about healthy environment and healthy people. And there is a study that was done that indicates about 20% of all the deaths that are happening is as a result of environmental related issues. This could be from the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, the water we take, and the ecosystem. And that indicates or shows the need that is there to monitor the environment. And that is what the GLOBE program is offering. And it offers a unique opportunity which cannot be realized. I don't think there is any other forum or any other avenue that will be able to provide the kind of data that can be provided by the citizen science. Because if you're looking at the rivers, for example, you have very many rivers in different parts of the world. And if you were to say that if an agency was to keep on monitoring the rivers, for example, it will be quite difficult. And there are other aspects that you need to monitor to ensure that the earth that you're living in is healthy. So for us, citizen science, as a GLOBE program, offers us an opportunity to monitor particular aspects. Our main focus area is in atmosphere, hydrology. We look at the pedosphere, which is the soil, and we look at the land cover, which is the biosphere. And then we look at Earth as a system, and that is one thing that we need to appreciate, that the environment we live in is part of us. And if you do something to it, then there is a way that it will always hit back. If you don't treat it well, then it still will not also treat you well. And that is why if we have citizen science, we have an opportunity where we keep on monitoring the health of the environment. And using the data that is generated, then you're able to make decisions or make informed decision that is usually that is backed with data. I'll give an example that was also presented yesterday of the kids who have been doing water quality analysis. And the water quality analysis, we are able to look at the pH, we are able to look at the temperature, we are also able to look at the nitrates and the phosphates, we are able to look at the transparency. For kids, that might be easy because they will do the research. We'll give them the platform, we give them the resources to do that. But what is more impactful is how they are able to interpret that data to be able to appreciate more. For example, if the temperature increases, then it has an effect on the marine life or the life that you have under the water. And that has an impact also on the food that we also have. And of course, the temperature has, the increase of temperature can be contributed by a number of factors. Like for example, if you have very many paved roads, it means that all the water, when it rains, because the paved roads are bound to get hot, then the hot water usually ends up into the rivers. And if you have hot water, then the retention, the amount of dissolved oxygen, which the kids are also able to monitor, they're able to see that they don't have as much, and the fish and the marine life also need that kind of data. When they look at all these parameters and then they look at Earth as a system and how they are contributing to that, I believe that offers a platform that we can also use, besides for learning purposes, to monitor the SDGs, because most of the areas within the SDGs are on the environment. Besides that, citizen science offers data that is available for research. Within the GLOBE program, the data that is collected by the kids is used for validation of satellite data. GLOBE was initiated by NASA and NOAA with the support of NSF. So that data meets the threshold that will be required for any kind of research, and for decision making, it meets the requirement that would be needed for that. Besides that, within the GLOBE program, we have a platform, because when you need to collect the data, you need the technology by which you're able to process that data and also disseminate the same amount of data to people that are able to receive. And the citizen science that we're proposing, or we've been encouraging, is the one that the kids get to do. And then from doing, they're able to ask questions that are related to their environment. And there is no other better way to address the challenges that we have in the environment by if you're not going to involve the youth, because again, the SDGs that we are mentioning, by which we seek to achieve by 2030, will be goals that generation will be answerable to, or they will be the ones who will be seeking whether they have been implemented. So it might be a very good opportunity to involve them now and then teach them, because when they understand how they are impacting on the environment by their actions and also the actions of other people. Like for example, if you, I'll still use the example of the water quality. If you clear land near the rivers, then that affects on the when it rains, they will bound to have erosion, and that affects on the clarity of the water. And then from the clarity of the water, the food chain also gets affected by that aspect. So from my perspective, I believe there are a number of proposals that we could make. And one is to involve the community, both in the formal and the informal. When you teach the kids, and then if they are in the rural setup, they will also inform their parents, and they are able also to monitor the environment with a clear understanding that whatever they are doing is impacting their local environment. And again, we need also to, the second one would be to move from the policies. We have very many policies, we have many research reports, which are peer reviewed. But how often do the research reports that are given, are they translated into educational material that can be used to impact the lives of the people who are in the village or in their local setup? Again, also there is a role for stakeholders, multiple stakeholders, the civil society, because we need people to help us, especially for the schools, the ones that would be doing citizen science, to be able to get the requisite equipment, to be able to be mentored on why they're doing it, and that is where the research scientist comes in. And then involving them in actual research, because if you involve them and they're seeing the benefit of the data, then they are also motivated more to collect the data. And then having that data being available, then you will have, we'll be able to make, as policy people will be able to make decisions that are grounded on facts. And that would also increase on how much. And they can make those decisions in the local setup. If, for example, they notice that the water is getting polluted, they will look for reasons or which areas is polluting the water, and then they can work on it from that particular level. And again, the other aspect is also to look at the system-based approach, whereby besides looking at the environment for monitoring, the private players also come on board, because they're the ones who are going to develop the systems which we can use monitor that, and under the GLOW program, we've been leveraging on that. We've been trying to help the kids also develop the system that they can monitor the environment. And I believe with that, we will also be increasing on the level of innovation, because once they understand the challenges that they have, and then they will look for solutions, and that is where innovation is also groomed. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Charles. Well, a very diverse range of views, from citizen science, from children, all the way through to how do we capture traditional, lay, local, and indigenous knowledge, with a little detour through values and faith-based approaches. So I think we would do well now to open to the floor. Please, if you would just indicate your name and, of course, put your hand up, and I'll gather you all up because of the time, and then we'll ask the panel to choose which question, unless you point a question at a particular panel member. So panel members, take notes, and I'll open the floor now, and then we'll ask the panel to respond to those, and we should hopefully finish in time for 5 o'clock. So the floor is now open. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Ana Celestial from the Philippines. I represent the Science and Technology constituency of CSOs under the Asia Pacific Regional CSO Engagement Mechanism. So I have a couple of points. First, thank you for organizing this excellent panel, which is very enlightening and very interesting. My first question, I'm not sure who to ask this to, but how do we balance or reconcile that on one hand, we should recognize and develop the capacity of indigenous peoples, local communities, and ordinary citizens in implementing and monitoring the SDGs, but on the other hand, we have this rigid framework in science and in the academe that I think Ms. Diana already mentioned, of not only scientific institutions, but statistical bodies as well in terms of collecting data. Because I remember from the Science Policy Forum, there's a lot of talk about valid data, how is data measured, which is valid, which is invalid. So that question. Secondly, I'd like to highlight also, like what Sir Charles mentioned about citizen science, I think we should also go into developing national capacities for science, technology, and innovation. This means removing reliance on imported tools and technologies and science and technology for nationally determined development for SDGs. And how are we going into that direction? And lastly, I would like to react on one of the panelists who said that data is neutral. Well, right now, we know that we all live in a world where data is very powerful. There is power in data, so lots of very large amounts of data is collected, especially in the digital world, but people where data is coming from have no control over how data is collected, used, presented. So my question is, are there guidelines on these collection of data and presentation of data, at least at the UN level? So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Yes, please, in the middle, the lady in the brown suit. Yes.
Thank you very much. I am Ahmad Madawi, representative University of Tehran. I have two questions.
May I just stop you?
Oh.
You're after the lady in the brown suit. You're very keen. I'm giving the floor to the lady in the back. Just 1 second,
Yes.
sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
I thought I was color blinded
No.
for a while and gender blinded. Sorry. Thank you. I have a question. I was actually impressed at the information provided by the panelists, and there's no doubt, I think we're beyond the point where we have to question the value of indigenous and traditional knowledge and citizen science in advancing the goals, and also in the role of all this in monitoring and review. And what I am actually interested in is the other side, like how far are we in terms of the acceptance, formal recognition and institutionalization of citizen science / local innovations, traditional and local knowledge. I'm glad to hear that from Diana, that in the preparation of GEO6, gray literature has been accepted. That's a far long way from what we experienced way back in 2005 when I was in the Intergovernmental Assessment on Agricultural Knowledge Systems, where we had to fight every inch of the way for gray literature to even be used as reference. And in the end, ISTD came up with a very out-of-the-box assessment that was even questioned by mainstream science and technology community because there was too much recognition of gray literature at that time. So I would really want to know, maybe this question is more addressed to Jackie, coming from the science and technology community, on the level of acceptance and how far or how near are we in providing a level of recognition that is on par with institutional science and formal knowledge systems. I think we really have to work towards that rather than looking at the supply side. I think the demand side is really important. And the second question is, like we're of sources of knowledge, diverse sources of knowledge. I want to know how these diverse sources of knowledge really translate into policies that shape decision making at the global level, national level, and regional level. Like I'm talking of there's actually increasing trend on creating mechanisms and processes on science, technology, and innovations that involve different stakeholders, supposedly as a reflection of the recognition of diverse sources of knowledge. For example, I'm in the 10-member group that supports the technology facilitation mechanism. I welcome that, and I think that should be welcome, but it still has to be seen how that translates into real decision-making, how non-scientists and non-state actually participate in decision-making on science, technology, and innovations policies, and also in developing roadmaps on science and technology. I think it would be good to hear some examples on that.
Thank you very much. Now, you're loading up all your interventions with lots of questions, so I'm going to have to be very disciplined. You're going to be disciplined. Could you restrict your interventions to just one question, please? So the lady in front of me, I think you had your microphone on? Yes, please. And then I'll come to our colleague from Tehran. So please, yes.
Okay, it will be very difficult to restricting to one question, but I'll try my best. Now, thank you very much, all panelists, for such a informative presentation. My main question also is especially to the children that are going to collect data, if I want to believe that's what you're going to plan to do. And the most important question is, how is that knowledge going to be verified? Who is going to give the pre-informed consent for that data that they are going to collect? Because that's very crucial. And I think because the colleagues who spoke about indigenous knowledge and about indigenous people's participation in different aspects, we find it very crucial, especially to have the pre-informed consent on that. The other important issue that I didn't hear it come out very clearly from all the panelists is the issue of institutional support, because most of the institutions really don't have the capacity to be able to collect that. Though among indigenous people there is a lot of knowledge that is there, but they normally also don't agree to give that knowledge because they are not acknowledged when the data is used and so on. So I'd like to hear about that. And also I think Isis and the rest is good to speak about the role of women. I didn't hear it come out very clearly. And women play a vital role in indigenous knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our colleague from Tehran, please.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. I try to make it very short because of the time. One from Ms. Alvarez about the life of nomads in Iran, that because I lived with them in the summers many years ago and now quite changed, and what is the relationship between that and the SDGs that you mentioned, if just more some explanation about. And one from from Dr. Denton about how faith can give social services to the society. And if we are in a mixed, religion society, how that works. Thank you.
So much. Now, I have two people here. Please, on this side, and then I'll come to the back. Thank you.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup. Moi, je vais parler en français. Je m'appelle Aïssatou Oumarou. Je viens du Tchad. Je représente AIPAC.
Bonjour, mon nom... Good morning, my name is Aïssatou, and I'm going to speak in French. I come from Chad, from a women pole community.
En fait, moi, c'est une contribution que je vais dire. Je vais parler de ce que l'expérience que mon organisation et ma communauté ont eu à faire dans mon pays.
Well, I'm going to contribute to the discussion, and I want to share the experience that my community is having with working with scientists.
Oui, dans ma communauté, nous, on a eu à travailler avec l'UNESCO pour promouvoir la connaissance traditionnelle des peuples autochtones, les Peuls en l'occurrence. Nous avons travaillé sur la météorologie, la prévision de la pluie journalière annuelle.
So we have been engaging with UNESCO to work on the traditional knowledge, the indigenous knowledge from our community on predicting rains every day, but also throughout the year, to understand what kind of rain it would be, the length of the rain, with scientists from meteorological organizations.
Et dans la communauté, nous, dans la communauté, tout le monde peut regarder, soit la pluie, soit les oiseaux, les étoiles ou les arbres, pour prévoir la pluviométrie, que ce soit quotidien ou annuel. On peut dire qu'il peut pleuvoir cet après-midi ou cette matinée ou dans la nuit. Et c'est à travers les visions à travers ces visions qu'on peut dire.
Through looking at birds, stars, or trees in our community, everybody is able to predict when it's going to be raining, either in the afternoon, in the night, and this is how we can look at daily rains, but also annually to understand when the rains are going to come and when the rains are going to stop. And this is what we have shared with the scientific community.
Et à travers ça, l'UNESCO nous a donné la chance de parler avec les scientifiques pour pouvoir voir la réalité de ces prévisions et mettre ça dans les connaissances traditionnelles, dans les data.
And through UNESCO, we were allowed to share our knowledge and to check the knowledge against the data, and to ensure that our traditional knowledge was in line with the scientific data and how it could contribute to their work.
À travers ça, comme je viens de dire, il y a plusieurs prévisions. On regarde plusieurs choses pour voir si cette année, il va y avoir beaucoup de pluie, si la pluie va revenir tôt ou tard. Et là, maintenant, l'UNESCO a choisi une seule de ces connaissances pour pouvoir valoriser, étudier d'abord et valoriser. Je suis ici, j'ai entendu beaucoup de personnes parler de données, surtout les responsables qui font des recherches sur les données. Et là, nous aimerons bien que ces personnes-là puissent aider à ce qu'on puisse mettre en valeur toutes ces connaissances pour que les autres personnes puissent bénéficier, mais aussi répertorier ces connaissances traditionnelles pour qu'ils puissent être archivés.
I'm going to condense a bit. Through the work that we have done with UNESCO, we managed to, they decided to focus on one specific knowledge that we have and help us to categorize. And with what we have heard from the different people in the panel, we would love to get some helps in understanding how to categorize the work that we do and the knowledge that we have, but also how to make sure that it is archived and kept throughout the years.
Oui.
I wonder
Voilà,
if I
c'est juste une partie, on peut en parler durant la semaine. Merci.
This is only one part of the work we have done, and I would be happy to discuss it with you throughout the week.
Parfait. Je vous en prie. Merci. Now we have one final question, and then I'm afraid we must come back to the panel to conclude on time, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Yugratna from India, and I'm a 20-year-old undergraduate student, and I'm representing Plan for the Planet and also part of the youth delegation here. First thing I wanted to share was not actually a question. The first was a very quick comment about a study that Plan for the Planet did last year with the Yale University, and it was with a student there and a bunch of us who did this, and we came out with very, very shocking results that said that, which actually contradicted all other previous studies done on forests. So some of the results actually said that there is space for about 422 trees per person to be planted more, and the other studies, the conventional studies till now always said that 150 trees per person is the maximum limit that we can go. And apart from that, some other shocking things that came out were that 9.5 billion trees are lost each year, 15.3 billion trees are cut down each year, but the difference is still replanted. So we still have like 6 billion trees being replanted, but it's not still that sustainable. And there was a huge opposition to the study when we actually finished it. But later on in September last year, it was published in Nature, and it is considered to be like one of the fourth most influential studies in the world in this context. So this was just to explain about what young people have been doing in terms of scientific research and contributing in this domain. And the question that I wanted to ask about was related to technology transfer and the patent process. Paris Agreement, for example, it clearly talks about in Article 2.2 about accelerating the technology transfer and accelerating how the patents are done and how patent process is transferred. So how do you think, how do you see this moving forward, and what are the new policies, especially for civil society and the citizens, that take this into account for a more better world? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So a very rich set of questions. Now, I'm going to put the panel under pressure. Please just select one of the questions to answer. I'm going to start at this end with Mohammed, please, if you would.
Thank you. I have just a brief answer to the question about the institutional capacity. I think up to now in many countries, at least for the countries in my region, I know there is no mechanism and no institutional capacity to deal with the traditional knowledge. I think one way of this, we can use this forum, UNIA and future ones, and maybe major groups can play an important role in proposing a decision or a proposal for countries to establish institutional capacities and how to deal in gathering information, establishing mechanism and a framework for the traditional knowledge.
I'm going to respond to the question about faith in a mixed religion society. Ahmed and I actually met a couple of weeks ago in Iran at a seminar that was sponsored by UNEP, UNESCO, and the Islamic Republic of Iran on environment, religion, and culture. And that was precisely the theme of the whole conversation, which was a very open dialogue talking about the ways in which, from my perspective, that diversity in religious and other forms among humans is as essential and as unavoidable as biodiversity is in nature. So the option is not there for us to somehow find one planetary religion or one great faith. But on the other hand, it is possible for us from a values perspective to look at the problems that our planet faces and to arrive at, through open dialogue and a respectful dialogue, at what we need to do. The issue is not what we believe, the issue is what we need to do together. And I think that the values conversation is extremely important, and it plays out in all sorts of ways that are under the surface, behind the scenes, under the table, and can really do damage to what we are attempting to accomplish together. And in fact, relate that to the questions about ILK and the use of grey literature. I've been really encouraged by what Jackie through Geo6 and UNEP has been trying to do to find another way. There's no clear pathway, there's no clear methodology yet for how to do this, but there is a real openness to finding ways to bring other kinds of knowledge, other people into the room, to the table in a respectful dialogue in order that we find not some universal truth about nature, but that we find some way forward together as a global community towards realizing the 2030 agenda. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Jim.
Thank you. I was going to take off on the great literature question. We have a unique opportunity here between the science, policymakers, the private sector, civil society, to introduce disruption. In the previous panel, it was brought up several times about the iPhone. In regard to previously, before that, there was a small phone company called Nokia that frankly barely exists today. Disruption in a positive sense can absolutely change from the time we finish UNEA 2 to 2 years from now. We absolutely can come back to this table and have the entire playing field changed. The choice is, how do we introduce disruption? How do we accept different opportunities? How do we incubate those possibilities between the nexus of policy, science, and civil society? And be open for it. That's the real question. I would leave you with, we believe that UNEA has a fantastic opportunity, and I'll use a business term, to create an incubation of coalitions, an incubation of ideas, and the reality is a certain amount of them are going to fail, and hopefully fail fast, and we can move on and keep introducing ideas so that we get positive disruption rather than we're waiting for the environment to disrupt the business as usual model that just can't exist. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll tackle the question that was asking about validation of citizen data collected. I think the best approach would be to have a structured way of data collection where you have, depending on the level of education, whether it's informal or formal, then have structures on how the questions are asked. I'll give the example of the GLOBE program where we have the protocols. The protocols are usually developed by the scientists. So if it's an area that requires study, like currently we have the new one that is exploring or looking at malaria and mosquito infestation. So you structure it in a way that you inform or you advise the people who are taking the research to do particular you have particular steps they're supposed to do. Within the protocols, we normally have the data sheets that the kids use. They also have the field guides. So they have steps on what they are supposed to do. and also on how they're supposed to record or report that data. And then within the system, we have checks. Again, the more you collect the data, the more you refine the checks, because again, when you have information that falls beyond what is normally, what has previously been recorded, then it's easier to pick out and then find out whether that is true. Then the other bit we do is we use equipment that has been vetted. So if it is an area of research, if it is you need, for example, to monitor the pH, then you use equipment that is standard. And then also we have training for the teachers so that, again, the information that the kids collect is instructed with the help of the teachers. Thank you.
On the need for free, prior, and informed consent, yes, we really should safeguard, we really should ensure free, prior, and informed consent if we are going to do knowledge generation on the indigenous peoples, because we are still the most misunderstood sector. And I also would like to react on because what our colleague from Philippines says that data is neutral. I would rather say data may be neutral, but the generation or the interpretation that is the one that should never be neutral. Yeah.
Thank you. So I will reply to the question about Iran. So not having been there myself, but working in a joint project for the Community Conservation Resilience Initiative, we could read carefully what are their livelihoods and how they could interact at the policy level, for example, with the monitoring of the SDGs. And there's a lot of potential. However, there's the big problem that in this specific case that we're talking about, an ICCA, an indigenous peoples and community conserved area and territory, it hasn't been officially recognized by the government. So all the structures for protection are the form of governance that's carried out in this area. It's according to what the government thinks, no? And this is a big problem because their own governance systems are not taking into account. So this is kind of delegitimizes the practices that they have been doing and that could actually report on different indicators that could relate to I don't know, availability of water or changes in the landscape or in the species availability. And this is also like another discussion regarding how these indicators are being designed and for who, no? Because if it comes from institution, as I said before, that are imposed, so probably this opportunity is going to be missed to be able to rely on the traditional knowledge and all the information that the community has for years. And the other question about women, I think it was my big omission because, you know, I'm always working on gender and I take this for granted and think that everybody understands it, but actually not. Yes, of course, it's very important to highlight that it is women that actually have closer contact with the natural resources that they depend on. So women, there's the role of women for fetching water, for fetching the non-timber forest products. So it is actually them that hold a lot of the traditional knowledge, and that's important to rescue it.
I'm sorry to cut you off. And Diana, please, to conclude for us. Thank you.
Yeah, so very quickly, on data, I think, well, data-driven science, evidence, policy, whatever, we have not to overlook the question of power and power struggle and power games. Who owns the data, who stores the data, who owns the algorithm. So there are a number of things which are quite important. So we all get excited about data, which is great, but we have to be careful with that. And if I can, one last remark on acceptance of indigenous traditional knowledge and how that, can be captured by the rigid frameworks of the traditional science, the normal science. I mean, there is no such a thing as science in a harmonized and universal way. I was trained as a physicist and as a social scientist, and what we call a proof in these two domains is quite different. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. There were a few requests for feedback from UNEP. If I can just leave you with one consideration. One of the prime forces that UNEP works towards is creating global commons. That is as true for knowledge as it is for patenting and for technology transfer, and within that commons to be very respectful of both the source of knowledge and how it's then potentially utilized by UNEP in creating knowledge and information for policy making. But I want to conclude with that. We've run over time, we started very late, so let me thank all of our panelists, and please would you give them a round of applause. Thank you.